Man, what's going on? Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video we are going to be ranking some more palettes, and for today we are going to be ranking my Colourpop palettes. I have here in front of me this bin all lined up and ready to go of my 12 Colourpop palettes that I own. I'm a huge fan of Colourpop's eyeshadow palettes. They are some of my favorites, and I think 12 is a pretty respectable number for an eyeshadow palette collector. But we're going to talk about them all today. I'm going to share with you guys my entire collection, how I would rank them from least to most favorite. Then towards the end of the video I'm also going to share with you guys the palettes from them, both new and old, that I still am interested in. But I think this should be a lot of fun. I hope that you guys are excited to join me before we get into the video. Special welcome to those of you that are new viewers to my channel. I hope that you'll consider subscribing. With that said, let's just get right into the bin. One quick note before we jump in. I know I say this sort of disclaimer before almost any eyeshadow palette video, but I do really like all of my Colourpop eyeshadow palettes. So even my bottom ranked palette, I do still somewhat enjoy. But let's start with that one. My last and 12th ranked palette is the URAQT palette. So this palette was kind of a spontaneous purchase for me, and I'm usually pretty thoughtful about the palettes that I end up buying. I was in Ulta. I think I had recently heard someone say this was a possible dupe for the Viseart Mini Paris palette, and that palette I was really interested in. So I kind of just picked this up on a whim. But I had hoped that this would give me some soft, cool tone purple looks, and what I found is most of the looks ended up looking very pink. A lot more along the lines of, say, the It's My Pleasure palette, which is more of like a magenta kind of pinky purple color. And while I don't mind that look and that color story, it's just not one that I reach for very often, and I was just so hopeful that this would be a little bit more cool toned. So I'm going to swatch some of these shades for you guys, and I don't even know if on camera you can tell, but there's a lot more pink in these than what appears in the pan. Perhaps the packaging threw me off, the soft purple packaging and these two shades right here, which are quite cool toned, but everything else, including this one that looks very cool and blue, that one has a pretty strong iridescent pink kind of undertone to it. So more than anything, this palette just wasn't what I was expecting it to be. There is another palette from them that I think maybe would have been a wiser choice, and we'll get into that at the end of the video. But for this one, because of those reasons and because I have hardly used it since those first couple tries, I'm ranking it at number 12. For the palette at number 11, see, It's My Pleasure palette. Now, I really actually like this palette a lot. I think it's very pretty. The formula is great. There are no pressed glitters inside here, but it's just not a color story I reach for very often. I really feel like if you are into a magenta pinky purple, I would probably go with this palette over this one, but I actually think the looks you get out of these two palettes are quite similar, despite the fact that they may not be necessarily dupes for each other. They do have a similar look and feel once you apply them to your eyes and combine some different shades together. Now, when I'm specifically wanting a pink kind of purpley look, this is the palette that I will reach for. I mean, this is kind of the ultimate pinky purple eyeshadow palette. Now, mentioning these two palettes at the bottom might surprise you, because I feel like the look that I'm wearing today looks like I could probably be wearing either of these two palettes. I'm actually wearing some Sydney Gray singles on my eyes today because I do have another video to film after this, and that's kind of for that video. This look reminds me of kind of what I was hoping this one would be, and even this one, but they are definitely actually both a lot more pink than purple in tone. And while I think they're beautiful, because I don't use it super often, and also for the simple fact that I have so many palettes left that I just like a little bit more, that's why this one's coming in at number 11. Now for my number 10 palette, I'm going with the Sweet Talk palette. I talked recently in a video about this palette and how if it wasn't for two issues in this palette, this might be one of my very favorites from them. I do love the color story. I love this color story a lot more than I love the color story of these two palettes right here. It's much more me. These are the shades I gravitate towards more often, but I so wish that these pressed glitters were not inside here, especially this one right here. And I don't know if I mentioned that in that other video that I talked about this palette. Well, I don't like any of Colourpop's pressed glitters. This one in particular is very chunky. The glitter particles are very large. This gold is a little bit more refined, I would say, a little bit more wearable, but they're just so messy to work with. They're not things I like to bother with, and more than anything, I just feel like it's such a disappointment that these could have been two shades that I would have gotten a ton of use out of. But for this video, I'm putting this one at the bottom because every time I open this palette, I just feel like, man, it's so pretty and could be so perfect for me, but because those pressed glitters just are not my thing, I tend to not pull for it quite as much. Now, coming in at number 9 is this very old palette. This is the All I See Is Magic palette. This is no longer available. It has been discontinued. This was, I think, a limited edition release for holiday 2017. So yeah, we're talking 3 years ago. So any of you people sensitive to shelf life, I'm sure will say throw this thing away. I still use it on occasion. I'm not a big stickler about my powder shadow products. I know they can expire, but I haven't personally felt like there's anything wrong with these. They perform amazingly well, and I think this is one of Colourpop's most beautiful color stories. I absolutely love the colors inside here. There's so much variety, but you get really soft colors. So this is like a colorful palette for people that don't even like color, because nothing in here is too bold or intense. But you have so much variety. You have a lot of peaches, you have some greens, you have some plums, you have some golds, you have some bronzes. You have so many options in this palette. This is such a fun one. One of the first Colourpop palettes I ever got. I'm putting this down at number 9 simply for the fact that it's old and discontinued. I don't tend to use it on camera for you guys because you are not able to get a hold of it. And I often even forget that I have it, but because it is one of my first Colourpop palettes and it's such a beautiful one, I can't get rid of this thing, even though it's coming in a little bit lower in the rankings. Similar to my thoughts on the All I See Is Magic palette are my thoughts on the palette coming in at number 8. This is the You Had Me at Hello palette. This came in a BoxyCharm, I think about 2 years ago or so. It is quite old as well, but I think this is such a beautiful, beautiful one. If you like berry tones, this would be a perfect color story for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe people may have compared this one to the Modern Renaissance palette. I don't know if those are dupes. I don't even actually own that palette, but if that is true, I can see why people love the Modern Renaissance palette, because I just think this is such a beautiful range of colors. You get some really soft neutrals, some warm and cool neutrals. You get some beautiful outer corner shades, this dark, dark brown, as well as a very dark berry tone, which I always love. And the lid shades in here are beautifully stunning. You get some lighter lid shades, some more mid-tone lid shades. It's a great one. I love the packaging on this one. It's back when they had the mirrors on them, so they feel a little bit more weighty and sturdy. I would love to know how many of you guys still have this palette laying around, and also how many of you, if you did BoxyCharm a couple of years ago, how many of you got this one in BoxyCharm? I know there were a couple options that month. I am so happy that I got this one though, because I do think it is beautiful. For the palette coming in at number 7, it is what I would consider one of their most underrated palettes, and it is the Night Owl palette. This palette flew under the radar in a way that I don't think any other palette has before. I remember seeing this come out along with like I think the Bye Bye Birdie palette, those kind of bird themed palettes that came out. I mean, this was a while ago. This was like the end of last year, I believe. But I remember seeing those palettes released on Instagram, and I think last holiday season I picked up this palette during their sale. And then when I went to show it, I think in a video just shortly after I bought it, it was already discontinued. And I think that is kind of a tragedy. Number one, this is one of my favorite packaged 9-pan palettes that they have come out with. I think the packaging on this, these owl feathers with the gold tips, is so adorable, so beautiful. I absolutely love it. I even love like the font on the front. Am I alone? Am I the only one that gets excited about fonts? But you guys, the colors inside here are so beautiful. You get some great neutrals in here. I know it looks like a basic bronze or brown palette. It doesn't look that unique, but there are some shades in here that are just so interesting on the eyes, particularly this one right here, which is the shade Bird Brain. I don't know if you'll be able to tell. I'm going to swatch this one for you guys, but it's like a gold that has a pinky purple. It's like a brown purple rose gold. I can't explain this shade. It's a little bit darker in tone than a classic rose gold would be. Has a bit more depth to it, but it also has even a little bit more, I don't know, I see so many different colors in there. I can't even describe it. I see some pink, I see some peach, I see some brown, I see some purple. I see some berry. It's just a really interesting shade. And on the eyes, it is absolutely beautiful. I also love that you get a very classic kind of yellowy gold inside here. Oh, that's stunning. As well as a traditional copper, and then plenty of transition shades and dark shades in between. Stunning palette. I just think this one got lost in the shuffle. I mean, there was a period of time there, the end of last year, and I feel like it's starting back up again, but Colourpop was releasing palettes literally, it felt like every single day, maybe every other day. There was just too many, and I feel like this one didn't stand a chance, which I think is so unfortunate because it is so beautiful. Ranked at number 6 is the So Jaded palette. This is such a fun palette. I, for some reason though, don't use this one nearly as much as I should. I feel like this should be ranked a little bit higher than it actually is. And I think there are 2 reasons that it's coming in lower than even I maybe expected that it would. Those 2 reasons mainly being the 2 pressed glitters inside here. But I think another reason I don't reach for this a lot is just because of the size. Sometimes with palettes that are larger and that have a very wide range of shades, especially that are kind of spread out like this, I just sometimes can get a little bit overwhelmed. It takes some thought to think about your eye look when you open up a palette like this. I've heard different reasons for why they laid it out the way that they did. I've heard some say that if you break into little quad areas, like those quads could create a full look. And I actually think that's pretty cool, because if you go through almost the entire palette and create like a quad area, I can see how you could get a look out of that quad. But when I personally look at this palette, I feel like I need to do quite a bit of thinking, and sometimes I'm just in too much of a hurry to think about those shades. Now, I do want to just say this. I filmed a 7 looks video on this when it first released. That was one of my favorite 7 looks videos that I've ever done, because there was so much variety in the eye looks that I created in that one. I think it's an amazing palette, but I can also understand the mindset of wanting to open a palette and just have everything laid out for you, so you don't have to think about the look that you're creating. You can just kind of throw something in your crease, throw something in your outer corner, and pop something on your lid and have a complete look without thinking much about it. You definitely need to think a little bit more about this palette, but if you're willing to think, you can get some amazing looks out of this thing. I think the packaging is beautiful as well. She did a great job with the whole concept of this palette. It is a fun one, but can certainly be overwhelming if you are not into some color. For the palette I have ranked at number 5, I'm going to go with the Blush Crush palette. This palette kind of took me by surprise. I picked this up the same day that I picked up the URAQT palette. I saw both of those in store. I swatched them both. But my thoughts on this one are kind of the opposite of what my thoughts are on the URAQT. This one, I didn't have as high expectations of, but it blew me away. It is absolutely stunning. Now, I remember seeing Samantha March use this on her eyes, I think the morning that I went into Ulta, and I loved the look that she created so much that while I was in store, I just decided to grab it. And I'm so happy that I did, because this is a stunning palette. This corner shade right here, you guys, oh heavens, how I love a deep kind of berry toned brown. I just think it looks amazing in the outer corner. It does have some shimmer in it, but when I pop it in my outer corner, I don't really notice that shimmer very much. I think if you're sensitive to some of that fallout getting stuck under your eye area here, which sometimes I am, I will just take, when I'm using the shade, a little cotton pad like this, and I'll just kind of place it right there to catch any fallout. Or of course you could do your eyes first, which I know a lot of people do, but I just think this palette is so pretty. You get so many beautiful shades in here. You get some beautiful lid shades, both light and medium. You get quite a bit of variety in here, considering it's a very monochromatic looking palette. I'm going to swatch these two shimmers for you guys, because I just think they are so beautiful. This one is the shade Enamored. There it is right there. Beautiful kind of shell peachy pink. And then this one right here is the shade Blossom Up. And it is a beautiful kind of rose with a gold flip to it. So stunning on the lids. Every look that I've ever created with this thing, I've been really surprised by how pretty the looks ended up looking. If you like pretty, soft, effortless, and feminine looking eye looks, you will absolutely love this palette. It's really, really beautiful. Coming in at number 4, I'm going with the Through My Eyes palette. Now this palette looks so used and abused. It is absolutely filthy, and there's something about this kind of texture on the cardboard in between the shades that it seems to dirty even faster than my other palettes. Now it has been used a lot, but this one just looks exceptionally dirty for me. I'm not quite sure why, but boy, do I love the colors in this palette. This is one of those palettes that is very colorful, yet you get enough neutrals in here that you don't have to go for like a wild rainbow looking look when you use this palette. It's just such a fun one to play with. At first glance, this palette seems very, very colorful and perhaps to some people intimidating, but I still think it's stunning, and it's one of the palettes I have so much fun when I do like a shop my stash and pull this one in. I know it's going to be a fun month with eyeshadow. We are down to my top 3, you guys, and coming in at number 3, I'm going to go with the Double Entendre palette. This palette is quite new to me. I think I just picked this up before the holiday season, and unfortunately I think it has been discontinued. In fact, 2 of my top 3 palettes have been discontinued, which makes me so sad, but it is a beautiful one. This is kind of everything I hoped the bronze palette from Natasha Denona would be. It gives you such a good range. Now, you definitely don't get the variety in lid shades, which is really where the Natasha Denona bronze palette shines. You have so many different options for your lids. I do want to swatch the bronze shades in here for you guys. They are definitely not quite as dimensional or reflective or even as warm as the ones in the Natasha Denona bronze palette, but they're very, very pretty. They're very golden, and generally speaking, considering my preferences that I explained, this palette just works a little bit better for me. For my number 2 ranked palette, I ended up going with the Going Coconuts palette. There was a moment that I put this at the number 1 because it really is one of, at least in the last 6 months, my most used Colourpop palettes. This is one of those palettes on days when I just don't have time to think about my eye look. I need to grab something that I just know is going going to give me quick results, this is the one I will grab 9 times out of 10. It's just a really good palette for me. I love the neutral tones in here. Nothing's overly warm or overly cool. It's just a beautiful palette. I love the textures of some of the shimmers. You do get a Super Shock in here, which has a little bit of sparkle to it. I know I've talked about it a lot this year, but it's one of those palettes that you look at it and you think that might be simple or boring, but it's just not. It looks amazing every time I use it. I am never disappointed. And not only am I not disappointed, I'm thrilled with my eye look every time I use this one. So now that we are down to number 1, I'm curious to know how many of you guys have narrowed it down and know what I'm going to pick. If so, say it with me. My number 1 palette has got to be the Kathleen Lights Dream Street palette. This is just such a fun color story. It's kind of a 75% neutral, 25% colorful palette, which is kind of where I like my palettes to be. I like to have plenty of options for a neutral look with a little bit of color thrown in there as well. I believe that this palette was my first Colourpop eyeshadow palette purchase, and I was so excited about this palette and wanting to really try everything out in here that this is the palette that broke me of my neutral and boring shadows only mold. It kind of got me out of feeling like color just wasn't for me. It got me excited to play with color. There's also a lot of sentimentality attached to this palette. It was my first Colourpop palette. I was a huge fan of Kathleen Lights, and I just think it's such a good one. The packaging is beautiful. The color story is just so very me. This is kind of the palette that really got me excited about eyeshadow palettes in general, and maybe started my whole addiction, which I don't know, maybe that's not a good thing. But truly, I just think this is one of their best. It is stunning. Love the bronzes you get in here. This kind of rose gold shade here. This deep brown has long been one of my very favorite browns in my collection. It is so beautiful in the outer corner and blends like a dream. The teals in here, while I don't use them that often, are the perfect shade of a deep oceany teal blue. I love this light coral here for a pop of color. This orange is great. I mean, really everything about this palette is just amazing. I absolutely love it. Every time I break this back out, it not only performs well and gives me a beautiful look, but I'm always so happy when I'm using this palette. And that, you guys, is it for all of my Colourpop palettes ranked. Really quickly, I know this video might be a little bit long. I'm just going to go through a handful of palettes that I do still have my eye on from Colourpop. The very first one being their newest release. Well, when I'm filming this video, their newest release, I'm sure there'll be a few more when this goes up, but it's their Garden Variety palette. Now, I've already seen a couple of YouTubers review and show this palette on their channels or on Instagram. It looks stunning. I think it is so pretty. The packaging of this one, honestly, I think 70% of me wants this palette for the packaging alone, but even the shades inside look absolutely beautiful. I'm sure many of them I might have something similar to within my collection, but there's just something about this palette that's really calling my name. Let me know if you guys are interested in this one. The next one I've kind of gone back and forth on is their Bare Necessities palette. Now, I know a lot of you guys actually own this palette. A lot of you love it and use it on a daily basis, especially for those of you that are maybe more neutral fans. I'm very curious to know if there are pressed glitters in here, because as I was reading their description, it doesn't make it very clear. Usually when there's a pressed glitter in their eyeshadow palette, I've noticed they capitalize the P and the G on the pressed glitters phrase, but this one just says there are glitter shadows in it. So let me know if you've tried it. Are there true pressed glitters inside this one? The other thing that holds me back, well, there's 2 more things. The price being number 1. I mean, it's not pricey considering what you're getting, but the second thing is just it's large. It's a large palette, and most of the time, with the exception of a handful of palettes that I don't mind reaching for even though they're large, I just have a feeling that this one is just not going to get used as much, because when I want a neutral look, I'm much more likely to go with one of, say, these 3 palettes than a large palette. So I don't know. I've kind of been back and forth on that one. It does look really pretty though. I don't know. Let me know. The last one that I still have my eyes on is the Flutterby palette. Now, this palette I did see some people review and try out on YouTube. A lot of people really seem to love this one, and it seems like this is the palette I was hoping the URAQT palette would be. It's a little bit more cool toned, it's a little bit more dusty, but it does have some pressed glitters inside it. I know it has one for sure. If you guys have this palette or have tried it, or maybe if you just perhaps know this off the top of your head, from the reading that I did on their website, I couldn't really tell which shadows were pressed glitters. I think it might just be the one kind of in the middle. If it's just that one shade, I think I would be okay with that and still pick up the palette, but if there are 2 pressed glitters in there, I'm just not sure that I can get behind this one. So I'd love to know if you guys know the answer to that. But those are the 3 palettes that I don't yet own that I'm most interested in. Of course, now I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. If there is a palette that I didn't mention today, even if it's one that's been discontinued that you think I missed out on, let me know down below. I'd love to hear what your favorite Colourpop palette is. But that is all I have for today's video. Thank you guys again for stopping by. I hope that you are all doing very well. I hope that you are all enjoying this month so far. One more reminder, if you're not yet subscribed, I hope that you'll do that before you leave, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye. Oh, the weird side ache in my rib cage. I breathe deep, it like pinches. Man, what's going on? I'm laughing, but it really does hurt. Please go away. Please go away. Tums? Tums, anyone? Special welcome to those of you newly visiting my channel. That's okay. Just say what you always say. Anytime I veer, I feel like it's not me. Number 7 and number 5 keep doing this. So whatever I end up deciding on for this video, just know number 7 and number 5. At one gas station it didn't work, but.
Oh, and can me and Jacob go play basketball?
Bring them back before you go do something else, okay?